All right, the meeting continues, the planning meeting of Wyoming City Schools. We are at our fourth item, which is a Board of Education review of policies, starting with policy 0167.1. Go for it, Kara.
Okay, it's my turn to lead the discussion on our policy bylaws, which are the rules that establish and guide the BOE. The first one is 1671, which is use of email and text messages. It basically outlines our email and texting is really only to be used to discuss agenda items, times, dates, places, respond to the public, administration, or school staff. We are not to use email and text for deliberation or discussion of issues that are going to be deliberated and discussed at an open meeting or executive session. We should have no expectation of privacy with our emails and text. So that's that one. Any questions? Or I guess just interrupt me if you guys want to talk about any of this further.
Okay.
1672 is use of our personal communication devices. And basically you'll see here that it lists various policies and administrative guidelines, which basically it just means we follow the same administrative guidelines and policies as Wyoming City School staff in the proper use of our personal devices, which these are things we're pretty familiar with at this point.
Right.
168 regards the minutes. And it's basically just to summarize, it says treasurer shall take minutes and provide a copy of the minutes no later than 2 days prior to the next regular meeting of the board. And according to this policy, it says they're kept on, the minutes are kept on file in the treasurer's office. Is that correct, Rhonda?
That's correct. Back to like the early 1900s. So if you ever want to come and dig through the books, come on in.
Pretty cool, actually.
Aren't they in a fireproof box? Or
They're in a fireproof safe.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're actually pretty interesting to look back at the old ones, and they're in these beautiful books, and they're all handwritten.
Wow.
Yeah, it really is kind of fascinating to look at. They don't look that nice now because I just type them and put them in the binder.
That's neat. Okay, 169.1. This is regarding public participation at board meetings. So the way this is summarized is basically, I guess, what I would say pre and post pandemic, because we're doing things a little differently now that we're on Zoom. One thing that I'll say about this, it's only, just to remind, only Wyoming residents and Wyoming City Schools employees may address the board under this public participation section. Speakers wishing to address the board will do so in allotted under, we have about 30 minutes assigned for public participation. Right. And I don't know if the policy committee is going to take this particular policy and review it after the pandemic, now that we're on YouTube and people can submit videos to participate. I don't know how long post-pandemic we would consider continuing that. But anyway, this is 1691 is a policy that looks a little different in writing than we're doing during the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah.
1692, open meeting sunshine laws. I don't know if you all had to do the same thing, but I had to read it a couple of times to kind of really get what they're referring to about committee versus subcommittee meetings, that sort of thing. But basically, with regard to open meetings in the Sunshine Law, we have to give notice of meetings. The majority of our members may attend social events, but not discuss public business. A meeting refers to any prearranged discussion of the public business of the board, committee, or subcommittee by a majority of its members, including but not limited to regular and special meetings, work sessions, retreats, planning meetings, etc. Okay, on to 171, and I'll just kind of quickly review 171, 171.1, 2, and 3. And 171 just basically says the board will continually review policies, which we obviously do this through our policy committee, which Jeannie and Aaron lead right now. In 171, it says the superintendent will take the lead on drawing our attention to any policies that may need revision, but things like simple formatting or anything non-substantive can just be corrected by the superintendent. With regard to 1, 2, and 3, it says we will continually review policies related to our educational resources. Part 2, review policies related to philosophy, goals, curriculum, etc. And 171 part 3 is we will continually look at our policy related to community relations, which we actively do all of those, I believe. So that moves us to the last one, which is policy 173, which just basically in this bylaw outlines what our board officers do. The president presides at all public meetings of the board. The president calls special meetings of the board, appoints all committees, signs notes, minutes, conveyances, contracts, and other legal instruments for which the signature of the president is called for, and assist in the preparation of the board agenda. The vice president does all these things in the president's absence. And then each committee chairperson basically calls meetings of the committee and keeps the rest of the board informed on developments in those committees and provides reports each regular meeting on those committees, which for all those who follow the board meetings, that's what we do in our regular board meetings. And
Okay.
that concludes my presentation on these board policies.
All right, that gets us through the whole, all the 0 board policies. So Aaron and I just went through a lengthy policy meeting, of which there's some that have just, I'm going to ask if Barb Paulo Castro can get them to you earlier than right before the meeting. There are some that only have a few changes, some of which are grammar oriented, but there are also some that, even though there's no change, there, one in particular on controversial issues, I'm going to ask everybody to please try to read the whole policy and become familiar with it.
Great.
Okay, superintendent discussion. Can we hand this back to you and just go from one to the other?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you. And so I will share. It's a discussion update. So just want to make sure that I answer any questions that that you have. The first one is on strategic planning, and excited to be talking about strategic planning. Excited to be talking about moving out of a pandemic pretty soon, and so very happy to be here. You know, a strategic plan helps us set a pathway for Wyoming City Schools and really helps us to identify the goals that we think are critical to best support our students and their future beyond their experience here in Wyoming City Schools. The action of going through the strategic planning process comes from the Citizens Advisory Committee. Last year, one of their studies was to look into the possibility of doing a strategic planning process. So they were researching other school districts, high-performing school districts, to see when they utilize this process, what the components of the process were, what were best practices. And so they did some great in-depth work to do some research on what that might look like here in Wyoming. And from that work last year, they came away with 3 recommendations. And I'll just share those quickly with you. The first recommendation was that Wyoming City Schools does embark on the process of strategic planning. And the goal would be to create a strategic plan that is actionable and a living document that helps to guide our annual goal setting and helps to create a vision for the next 3 to 5 years for Wyoming City Schools. And what do we want to do for students? The next recommendation that they came away with was to utilize a facilitator. And from their conversations with other school districts had had a very positive experience with the Hamilton County Educational Service Center. So they recommended that we go there first and connect with their leadership to help facilitate that process, which we're in the process of doing right now. And then the third recommendation was to make sure that we cast a wide net and have all stakeholder groups be able to be included in some way, shape, or form, whether that be through focus groups, whether that be through open meetings or through access to surveys to make sure that their voice is heard. And so all of that is going into the planning process for the work that we'll be doing. We had hoped originally, after the CAC reported to the Board of Education, we spoke about our desire to enter right into that process this year. Pandemic kind of put a little bit of a damper on that. It didn't make sense to be able to set aside the time needed to have these critical conversations. So we weren't able to do that within a pandemic, but we're excited to be again in that position to look at this this work happening in the coming year during the 2021-22 school year. So right now, we are working with Hamilton County Educational Service Center, the leadership there, to design a process. And the specific work right now is creating focus groups, a plan for focus groups to happen this spring, and the creation of survey tools that would be used throughout our entire Wyoming community. And again, the goal is to make sure that we have information, people have access to providing feedback across our entire Wyoming community. Hamilton County Educational Service Center also realizes that in the past several years, there's been some really great work done where individuals have been in communication with the school district. One of those things was the superintendent search and all the focus group information that was collected at that time. Another source of information was the previous year's work of the CAC. And all of the information about the school district and what our strengths are and what our opportunities for growth are. So the county also has access to that information, which is critical. And then even last year, we had community conversations where we were meeting with families, we were meeting with students, we were meeting with staff members, and we were meeting with community members. Same idea, what's working well here in Wyoming, what are opportunities for growth, and what are the expectations for the school district. As all of that information will be part of this process. So the timeline right now, what we're looking at as we're designing the plan for our strategic planning conversations would be for the spring, after spring break, to begin the focus group process. And so we'll actually begin meeting with individuals, pulling groups together. We'll be sharing a survey. And so our goal this spring is to pull together as much information as we possibly can and get the thoughts and beliefs of our staff members, our students, our community members on where we are as a school district. And then beginning in the fall of next year and the winter of next year would be for our team to utilize that information to begin having these conversations to ultimately build a strategic plan. So at this time next year, my hope would be that we are communicating our long-term plans as a school district and what we want to do for students. And by the time a student graduates from Wyoming City Schools, the characteristics that we want to, we want to make sure that they've got as part of their skill set to help them be successful for life beyond Wyoming. Again, excited about it. So that's the timeline as that we'll be working through. Also important to share that as we do this work on a month-by-month basis, I want to share everything that's happening. And so this will be a very transparent process so that everyone can see how this is growing all along the way. So good things. Any questions?
Will there be any concern about, as you're doing these focus groups, are you doing them the same time that you're doing some other searches?
Well, I'm working right now with the county to see what their schedule looks like, and so as I see other districts and there are other school districts that are involved in this same process, and I think others have waited to get through a pandemic to begin the same types of things. And so you're right, there are other things that are connected to Hamilton County and this kind of work. I have kind of nudged us to the front with those folks, and so I think we'll have a lot of access to their schedule to be able to have these great conversations. And if it needs to carry out into the summer, we can definitely do that. Again, this first part is about pulling together as much information, data gathering as we possibly can, and then the actual work to build this plan begins then in the fall.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I also just want to say I'm so glad that the CAC did the work on the strategic planning, and you said we'll be coming back to this because that was hard work on the part of those volunteers to pull together some suggestions for process. And I'm glad that you did that. And, I think all the work you did with you and Susie with the community discussions can feed into the strategic plan, the focus groups in terms of when we did your search, as well as the Citizens Advisory Community Forum. So a lot of good work by CAC in conjunction with these other things to all begin to dovetail into a strategic plan. So really happy about that.
Yeah, I agree. And as I was speaking with individuals from the county early on, I thought it was critical to share that we have access to so much information that can't be lost. Those are really critical, important conversations that happen at that point in time and provide a historical perspective that really needs to be considered as part of this process. And happy to say that it is for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are we okay if I shift on to another topic, our belonging and inclusion collaborative, and just wanted to share some of the work that's been happening there. I know we spoke about looking at some data today. I know our meeting is running long and we're just not quite ready, but we will be here pretty soon. But just wanted to take a step back and share overall what kinds of things the group is working on. Again, our goal in the Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative and our goal in terms of climate across the district is to create this great sense of belonging. We want to make sure that students, families, staff members feel valued, feel as though they belong and they've got their place here and can capitalize on their experience by being a part of Wyoming City Schools. That's the nature of the work. And so early on, this group identified some actions that we could take that help support that work. And so some of those actions were to just analyze and be reflective of where we currently were with regard to some different sets of data. One of those areas is looking at course enrollment and the equity of course enrollment. And do all students have access and are they accessing courses in the way that we want them to in an equitable way? We've talked about aligning student and staff demographics and thinking about our hiring practices, our recruiting practices, so that we have the best possible staff to be in front of our students each and every day. We've talked about looking at student discipline and what's the student experience and how does student discipline data reflect that experience. We are also looking at curriculum resources. Do we have the best curriculum resources to support all areas of the curriculum within our toolbox? And then another piece that we've talked about, and it's been a challenge within a pandemic, but it's certainly part of our goal as we move forward, is student voice. Are we listening to our students? There's no better person to talk about their experience than our kids themselves. And so how can we capture our student voice and listen to them and allow their experience to help us be better teachers, better leaders across our school district? So really, really passionate about this work. And I know everyone who's involved is passionate about it also, because it creates opportunities for our students. Right now, we're looking more closely at our course enrollment, and we've specifically pulled information from 3 years, looking at our high school data on course enrollment and looking at course enrollment by demographic. We found out that that's just a sliver of data, looking at 3 years worth of data. So we're digging back to middle school, where different courses begin. And so if you think in 5th grade, there are some opportunities for different level courses, back to 5th grade math specifically. So we're looking at data and just to understand again what our student experience is like, and how do students enroll in these courses and what's that process look like. Ultimately, our goal is to be reflective of all of our practices so that students have access to the courses that they want to have access to, and there's equitable access to those courses. So good, intense work happening. And so again, we're looking back, we're pulling that data from the middle school to better understand kind of how that works for students over time, and we're trying to pull together cohort data. So this is an ongoing process. I pull that out because that's more specifically what our group is working on right now. We are also having conversations about a way that we can structure the work of the Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative to focus on all of those areas at the same time, and maybe even separating ourselves into different teams, similar to what our CAC is doing on study teams, so that we can have continued growth in all areas over time. And so we're having some conversations about what that might look like, because we think all of it is important. And so we're trying to identify what are those short-term goals, short-term gains, and then long-term, where do we want to be in those areas? Again, all with this target of belonging and making sure that everyone experiences belonging. So that's currently where the work is within the team. And I just appreciate all of those folks for the passion that they have for students, and wanting every student's experience to be a good one, and for understanding this work goes in all areas of diversity, and so we continue to talk about that within our team too. So great things happening with the group.
Have any more meetings been set with the Belonging Inclusion Collaborative?
We do have a meeting scheduled. Now we, as the board committee, we need to set, I've got on my to-do list to set another meeting for us. Aaron, Kara, you both, and myself and Susie. But the Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative has another meeting scheduled late May, or I'm sorry, not May, March. I see Susie looking at her calendar, so I'm assuming she was looking at that. Yes, I just don't have the date on hand.
March 30th.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
All right. In that case, we are at the end of our meeting. May I have a message? May I have a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry, guys.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
May I have a roll call?
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick,
Yes.
Mr. Meese.
Yes.
All right. This meeting